Fallout 76 provides a massive world and a familiar universe dense with monsters to fight, places to explore, and items to loot. It is also a barely functional program. Fallout 76 takes place in the rural West Virginia wasteland Appalachia. Although calling it a wasteland is a bit of a misnomer, Appalachia is far more colorful, and despite the fact that the non-vault human population is totally extinct, it's much more lively. When you first step out of the vault, you enter into the forest, the first of the game's 5 regions. The forest is full of lush vegetation and wildlife, and that color and that life provides a stark contrast to the typically dull and homogeneous wastelands of former titles that are pretty barren, matte grays, blacks, browns. 76 reminds me much more of New Vegas, in that New Vegas, it did have life, it felt alive, although it was a desert, so it was very toned down. This is when you first step out, there's trees everywhere, flowers, plants, there's bunnies there's little rabbits like hopping around, squirrels, beavers, there's animals. It's very alive, which I really appreciate in the Fallout series, because we haven't seen that too much. We usually see the bombed out remains of major cities, and this is much more of a rural area, so I enjoy that we're exploring that. You quickly encounter the new villains of Fallout 76, the ghoul-like Scorched. These Scorched are actually victims of the plague that eliminated the humans in the area, and then that plague is the primary crux of your quest. As the survivors, you must reclaim Appalachia and prevent this plague from spreading and presumably wiping out the rest of humanity, whoever else has survived the bombs. Beyond the forest, there are 4 other imaginative areas that each establish their own identity, both visually and thematically. For instance, the Ash Heap is a black, smoky, lifeless area that experienced strip mining prior to the war. It's inhabited by the Mole Men, who are these tragic mutant offspring, presumably people that took cover in the mines or of the ex-miners, and they patrol shotguns and missile launchers, and detective work reveals that this was a pre-war area torn apart by rampant automation and economic strife. This idea of out-of-control automation runs throughout the entire game. That's why Fallout 6 still has vendors and quest givers, even though the human NPCs are infamously absent. Like, none of them. They're just all robots. I mean, they're functionally the same, right? You have a character named Vendor, and he sells you stuff. It's functionally the same. But I do think it's a nice bit of a nice dash of science fiction, because automation is something that we as a society are needing to tackle very soon, as our labor is increasingly automated. So I appreciate that this is something that Fallout is tackling, not necessarily as a story, we'll get to the narrative later, but to inform the world here. Nearly every industry in Appalachia has been automated or is in that process, which led to an increasingly severe class divide. So we also have this class warfare going on between the wealthy they own businesses and are able to replace all of their labor with robots, versus the poor that they're not on the ski slopes of the Savage Divide. They're starving to death in their houses in the forest or ash heap, and there's just a lot of tragedy with them. And then the wealthy up in the Savage Divide and their ski slopes, because that's the area where most of the resorts and such are. So very stark contrast between these two locations and the kind of things you're going to be finding, kind of notes and such. Each area is stuffed with dozens of locations to explore. Somewhere as small as a single house, so you come to a place that says, "Welcome to this dude's home." It's just this house, it's very small. And then others are just entire dungeons. They have multiple floors, they have little quest lines. Many of them, if they don't have their own quest lines, at least have their own stories with notes and holotapes to listen to. The raw size of Fallout 76's map, it's about 4 times larger than Fallout 4, is one of its greatest strengths. It's a very simple thing, but the game's just so big that your character can get 100 plus hours of adventuring pretty easily. There's so much to walk around, so much to do, so much to explore, so much to loot. Go through the quest. I'm sure by the time this published, it's probably already like a 3-hour speed run or something done. Probably less than that. But if you're just casually playing and properly exploring and enjoying the world, tons of content here for you. The gameplay loop of Fallout 76 is exactly what you'd expect of a modern Fallout title. Shoot, loot, upgrade, and repeat. Your arsenal begins with low-tech melee weapons and pipe guns and slowly expands from there. Fallout 76 includes a wide range of all weapon types, and that diversity is further enhanced by the number of mods available to each weapon. So the melee weapons, some of the melee weapons don't have a ton of mods. They have at least a couple of mods. But then a lot of the firearms and energy weapons, they have like dozens of mods, so you can really diversify your arsenal and what you want your character to be just on the weapon selection alone. But the crafting and modification system isn't quite as easy this time around. You know basically nothing when you start. Your character knows nothing. Just you can craft a couple very basic things. So every weapon, armor mod, food, camp object, they have to be discovered. You have to find them. Some of them are treasures that you just find. You find something that says recipe, whatever, and you can read that. There you go, you got it. But a big source for plans, especially regarding weapons and armor, is scrapping. So when you scrap a weapon or armor, you get a chance to unlock a recipe for that piece of armor or for that weapon, whether it's a mod for it or if it's the item itself. And some of the food, you can get recipes for when you first pick up the food. You can get like first pick up a chunk of meat, you learn how to grill it. A few examples like that. That doesn't seem to happen particularly often, but mostly when you just come across a new food type. I do like the system that it provides a incentive to kind of hoard all these weapons, especially if it's a weapon that you plan on using or expect to be using. So if you want to use a certain kind of pistol, you're really going to be looking for those pistols, so you can break them down and try to learn more about the pistol. You kind of research. It's kind of a way for you to do research in game. It's like gamifying research instead of it being a passive thing, and I do appreciate that. Armor selection is a little less expansive. So you have power armor, which is again tied to a frame system similar to 4. It comes in 4 base flavors. You can find it in 4 flavors, I should say. Regular armor is light on mod options and doesn't really hold much character. I mostly just took the highest resistance I could. Just that's it. Didn't care about much other. And I think a big part of that is because there's a clothing system. You can find clothes that are just costumes or skins, and they override your armor visually. So they just you still get the bonuses of the armor, but you don't see them anymore unless you're wearing some particulars. There's some particular Under Armor items, such as your default Vault suit, which are below your armor. So it's cool. I mean, it's fun to run around in your costumes. You'd be like, I'm a clown. You run around in a clown costume, and you still keep your armor protection. That is nice, but I would like an option for if I want my armor on top or below my clothes, because I just found a costume I liked, and then my armor visually didn't matter, and stats I just needed the best stats, so it's just whatever. But so the armor and then the mods aren't a ton of mods, and they obviously have passive effects. It's a little less interesting to mod the armor than the weapons, but I suppose that would be typical of the game anyway, because how exciting is your armor going to get? And the locations are all littered with mundane objects that can be scrapped for crafting materials, very similar to Fallout 4, except the costs for crafting and maintenance are even higher. So if you didn't like just hoarding desk fans for screws, it's just worse now. You're not going to like it at all, especially because weapons and armor seem to degrade much more quickly. So you're going to need a lot of junk all the time. It's basically treasure. Just you need a junk all the time. Whatever you need to make ammunition, repair your weapons, make armors, whatever. You're going to be hoarding this stuff. Especially if you make a decision for something expensive, like a lot of automatic weaponry that requires a lot of ammunition. You're going to be hoarding lots of lead and gunpowder or whatever. If you're using fuel cells, you need like plastic for your fuel cells and such. And that demanding crafting system is aggravated by these really punishing carry weight rules. So everything has weight. This isn't really unusual, but even your private stash is also restricted in storage by weight. There are some things you can do to alleviate all this, because it requires so much weight off junk and weapons you find or whatever. Good luck storing those weapons, because just junk alone is going to take up most of that weight. If you're just hoarding stuff for crafting later, you can bulk them together to reduce the weight. You can also, of course, scrap your junk into components for less weight, but it take just a little bit of neglect or mismanagement, and you're gonna have a big old headache of, oh, why is my stash overweight and I can't put stuff in my stash? Where's this extra weight coming from? Oh, this gun I found weighs 30 pounds and I'm not using it yet. Is it worth saving it? If I take it out, everything's solved, but then I'm not gonna be using this weapon, whatever. So it can be, it's real punishing. Like, I, for the most part, just store only junk in the stash. I have maybe one weapon for future use, maybe some costumes, and the rest is junk. I don't think I have any aid in there anymore, any medication or food. It's just all junk. There are perks that reduce the weight of certain items. Those aren't exciting. They're very useful, but you're not. Woo! I leveled up, so now my junk weighs 10% less. Like, it is useful in terms of the game, but it's not a very exciting option. A good example of all this is that bobby pins weigh something like 50 times heavier than they do in real life. Even the bobby pins that weight, I don't know why they should be basically weightless, but they will add up in weight very quickly. And the same with like ammunition will add up in weight very quickly. Or food, stim packs in particular, all that stuff will add up in weight very quickly, and you'll be over encumbered all the time. It's obnoxious. If you do get those weight reduction perks, it helps a ton. But then you'll be replacing you. There's a good chance you're not going to have all of them, and if you do have them, you're good chance you're going to be replacing them with more combat oriented perks at different times. And speaking of perks, cards now represent your perks, little playing cards. Each level gives you a special point, and then the option to choose one perk card. There are categories of perk cards associated with each of the special categories, and the total cost of your equipped cards will cannot exceed the level of their associated attribute. So if you go for 10 strength, you will have picked 9 cards, because it gets you start with one. So you will have picked 9 strength cards. Each perk card carries a cost, and in that situation, you would not be able to have more than 10 strength worth of cards equipped active at a time added up. You can just have all the perk cards at some point, but just the active ones that are on are what matter for that system. And some levels give you a card pack that contains several random perk cards, which you can use or just store. That is especially useful in the beginning when you have no perk cards and you're taking one at a time. That can fill up your unused slots with some random cards, little perks, and they also might give you a duplicate, and you can combine duplicates for more power. And the system actually works really well. I don't really have any problems with it. It's You can select what you're going for with that per level perk, and then the perk card packs are like, hey, maybe I get something good. Maybe I get an animated version, which is functionally the same, but it's animated. It's like a hollow. Yeah, it's kind of fun. There are plenty of perks available. They're flavorful. They have synergies. You can really build multiple styles of characters with it. But the lack of transparency is a little frustrating. You can see what level it's kind of a bit of a tongue twister. Perk card packs are unlocked, but that's buried in the list of challenges that otherwise just provide the special currency for cosmetics, the atoms. It's pretty hard to plan out your character because you can't see at what levels what perks become available. You just level up and you select one of the special attributes, and there's some cards there, and you don't know what cards are. Those are the cards available to you, and unless I'm missing a button or something, you can't see what all the cards are and at what levels they become available, and that would have been really nice. So that way, when I initially level up or decide where I want my character to go, I could kind of peruse through and then plan it out. But that doesn't seem to be possible within the game. Level 50 is the maximum level, where your attributes no longer increase, but you will level up beyond that, and you will earn perks. So you can continue to choose perks, occasionally get perk card packs, but your specials will be locked in, and then that will give you more versatility and perks switching in and out. You can't currently redistribute your attribute points, but that has been promised for future patch when that comes in, hopefully soon. Hopefully, by the time or shortly after this review. Because as it stands, you might make some poor choices in your specials, and you can't get all the cards you want for your character, and you already played the character for like 40 hours or whatever. That can be pretty frustrating. Building returns, but this time in the form of personal camps and public workshops instead of the NPC settlements. The camp is where you find your stash, you can build out your crafting stations and handle your equipment, and also construct beds, walls, defenses, and even things like instruments and pictures, decorations, such like that. Defense seems a little pointless, though, because your camp is very, very rarely threatened. Occasionally you'll have a mole rat find you, and then do you even need your camp to defend it? So it doesn't seem to ever be attacked when you're not there, and if you are there, you'll just kill the thing. So I don't... It seems like a bit of a waste of time. The camp can be moved anytime for a small fee, but moving it intact is impossible because the blueprints don't save right, because of course they don't. So you can build an elaborate home and leave it in one place, or you can move just the basic camp around instead of rebuilding a new house every 5 minutes. The biggest benefit of the camp, beyond all consolidated crafting stations, is that it provides a no-cost fast travel waypoint. You can always fast travel to your camp for free. And otherwise, fast travel bears a cost proportionate to the distance. So, pretty popular strategy seems to be center your camp around, put your camp somewhere in the center of the map, and then fast travel to it in between waypoints. So you always have kind of a, so you'll mostly have reduced travel costs in most places. You can claim public workshops to passively gather resources while you're adventuring in order to satisfy those huge chunk demands we talked about earlier. And you do need defenses there because the claimed workshops will occasionally attract waves of enemies, which sounds fun in theory, right? Like you have a place that gives you a reward, but you have to defend it, and you can build towers and walls, and almost like a tower defense kind of thing. But the building controls are way too cumbersome for that, and you have a pretty limited number of what you can even build. So defending the workshops is really awkward, especially because so many enemies are either flying or they're burrowing. So your fences are just nothing. If they're armed enemies with guns, they'll just gun down your turrets regardless, unless you have higher level turrets. But you only have one turret and trap available by default. You need recipes for the other stuff and a special perk card to build the other things. So it is not it's not a very elegant system. If you want a workshop, you really need to decide, is all the time and effort I put into this thing worth what I need out of it? Oftentimes that's yes, because the junk demands are pretty harsh and some of the workshops are pretty specialized in their resource. But I found it wasn't something I was doing every time I was playing. The survival mechanics from previous titles return, including hunger, thirst, and disease. I wouldn't worry too much if that's not quite your style. The food and water are plentiful, even if you don't set up a garden at your camp or workshop. If you just eat and drink for a little healing or for the buffs, it's enough to sustain yourself. If you go AFK for a while, though, or if you do lots of fast traveling, that will drain your food and water. There are perks that handle that. And if you're fast traveling, you can see eat or drink. If you're AFK, then you need to be careful. I went AFK for, I don't know, I want to go eat dinner or something, and almost like died of thirst in the game. Disease, on the other hand, is much more threatening. There's infected water, air, and enemies, and each of these can affect you with a disease, which are debuffs. Some of them are pretty harsh. They will resolve on their own, but you can use medicine to remove them sooner. Although that medicine disease gear, I kind of wish they kept it antibiotics, but I can understand why you would change that, because not necessarily every disease is handled by antibiotics, especially because one of the diseases is specifically called parasites. Yeah, disease gear is less common, but you can find crafting recipes for it. And there's only been once where I've needed to stop and say, hold on, I need to go find some medicine, because my character is very sick. That's only happened once to me so far. But I did hear someone else complaining with a similar situation, and I didn't have too much of a problem with it, but I can see how some people might find that kind of tedious. Normally, I won't even mention a photo mode, because I don't care. However, the photo mode in Fallout 76 is actually pretty good. It's comprehensive. There's a bunch of frames and character poses you can get and unlock. Their rewards, your rewards for quests. You can get them for atoms in the shop. And one of the best aspects of this is that these photos in your photo mode will appear as loading screens. So even though I thought I wouldn't care at all, I actually found that setting up these group photos after we do something cool or accomplish something, get a big fight, knowing that I'd see them again was actually pretty satisfying. And then I'd see them later and say, "Oh yeah, I remember doing that. That was fun." And this is like one of the best photo modes I've seen, just for that reason. It's such a simple idea. Probably the most intuitive, probably the best idea I've seen in the game. It's crazy, but it's like so intuitive and elegant. You just take those photo modes, put them as loading screens, voila, it's great. I doubt 76 is even the first game to do this, but it's the first game I've played that has done this, and I can't think off the top of my head. But I wouldn't be surprised to hear that's unoriginal. But I loved it. I thought it was great. And finally, as far as gameplay is concerned, events are new to the series. These events act as recurring public quests that provide some reliable rewards, such as you can get cups of tea for protecting the giant teapot. That's fun. Some events can be completed alone, while others are more clearly intended to be tackled by groups. If you're strong enough, you can do it alone, but There are some where like you need to go to multiple areas in a relatively short period of time, or there's a very huge swarm of enemies in order to fight. So they does seem to be intended for groups. Some of the events are pretty interesting, but too many are just kill this thing or protect that guy, which okay. In particular, to protect the guy or protect the thing, missions are painfully slow because it'll say wave one and it's like three dudes and they have to wait 2 minutes for wave two, which is maybe four enemies this time that you kill in seconds, and then you wait. It's a lot of waiting. It's really weird. Okay, now the big part, multiplayer. It's the most obvious difference between 76 and all the other Bethesda epics is that Fallout 76 is intended to be a multiplayer experience. It's kind of is. It works well enough as long as you're with friends. Then it's mostly just a cooperative Fallout. You can exchange treasures and revive each other in combat, and obviously you're fighting together. You can share your perks, or use buffs. The charisma attributes kind of revamped because there are no NPCs. It's more about buffing your team. So you can have a charisma character who's kind of the team leader that buffs all his teammates. That's a fun idea. I'm really into that. I didn't play with that very much myself. I don't know a lot of people who did because it seems to be a lot of people seem to prefer just, be the fighter themselves instead of buffing everyone and being like, go get them. Some of the charisma benefits, I mean, do come back to you, but most people haven't seemed to play around with that too much. But yeah, I do like that freedom that's there. And fighting through this epic adventure with your friends is fun. It is fun. And so it's as fun as you expect. A lot of games are more fun with your friends, and Fallout 76 is no exception to that. However, when it comes to the strangers wandering with you, I don't see the point. I get paid at my day job to talk to strangers on the phone, so incorporating that into my leisure time is kind of weird. The world's large enough that you won't necessarily be crossing paths with other people, but you still feel the presence. You'll hear distant gunshots in the distance, or you'll find dead bodies around that a player came and killed these guys. And the doors will be open and the area's already looted. The containers have individual loot specific to you, but I mean, you'll still see them cracked open, and the junk that was on the shelves is all gone. So someone's been there, and you're just kind of picking up after them. Sometimes you'll run into an area, there'll be some guy in the same area, you're both fighting together. That doesn't really feel very cooperative. That just feels kind of like your mysterious stranger perk showed up and shot with you. Like it's just something there that's happening. It doesn't feel interactive. If you are on a team, the team leader's quests are broadcast to all players in the team, but you can't really help them with the quest. You can only really help out in combat, and then you get a cut of the quest rewards. If you're sharing the same quest, you have to repeat all the steps. That's why you can't help your team leader. Everyone has to do the exact same steps. If you need to go to a room and press a particular button on a particular console, all of you need to do that. It doesn't matter. The game will be like, oh, you need to realign the dish array using this console. Intuitively, it would be one person to do that because that would realign the dish array or whatever, and it would be done. But in 76, each of you need to do it yourselves, so you all line up on this computer to all press the same button to do the same thing. It doesn't. It's inexplicable because it's just nonsense. It's like, oh, everyone, we gotta all do the same critical task. It blows my mind. It feels so bad. And then that would also extend to strangers, not just your teammates. You'll go to a quest destination to complete some important task that only you can do, except there's a dude in line in front of you and another dude in line behind you. You're all doing the same thing. Why am I doing this? Other people are already doing it. It's just this really obvious, clear redundancy that creates this narrative dissonance, and there are story quests, but they feel really artificial because everyone's already doing it. Players can trade. Anything that would be hard to get wrong. Games have had functioning trade systems for years, just years. But as it would be proper for Fallout 76, the trading system is unusual and unintuitive. Instead of proposing item for item trades that both players agree to, I want this thing, I'll give you this for it, except boom, trade done. You can only kind of propose an item for caps. Yeah, I'll sell this to you for X caps, and then they can click on it and buy it, and transaction done. You're not trading; it's only buying and selling. The sales are all final, so unless it's someone like a friend that you trust and are communicating with, trading isn't really a thing. You can, at best, buy or sell maybe something. It takes too much effort. It shouldn't be that much effort to trade. Really, I'm not sure why the game doesn't just treat everyone as if they're on the same team all the time. Anyway, there is theoretically PvP, but it's pointless. It's just pointless. Two players can agree to fight for fun, I suppose. If one player doesn't want to participate and the other one continues to attack him, he'll become wanted. That wanted status acts as a global bounty that's paid out from the crook's personal funds, so it's supposed to be a punishment, discouragement from engaging in PvP. But if you discourage players from doing it and there's no reward for doing it, why even have it? It doesn't. It's just so. It's so pointless. I want to do PvP. I want some PvP. It doesn't necessarily need to be a giant battle royale mode where everyone shoots each other all the time. But I want to have a reason to fight a human player if I choose to do so, and there's not really any of that. The bounties themselves, although the punishment, now I say that, the bounties are really small, so it doesn't even matter. People, it's hard to justify hunting down a player unless they're way weaker than you are, because they'll be worth maybe 10 or 20 caps, which isn't very much. Especially if they're a player of similar power, or if they're skilled, they're going to be healing, they're going to be dodging, they're going to be fighting back. It's going to be very expensive to have this fight, and it's not worth it. You can also earn wanted status by trying to take over a public workshop or attacking a player's camp, but activities aren't really worth it. Again, especially, I mean, stealing a workshop if you're really desperate for that workshop, sure, maybe you can kind of justify that. Attacking a player's camp is just a jerk move and doesn't give you anything. And the one status is just non-functional regardless, because if you're in a group, it doesn't extend to your entire group, which which makes sense if you're playing with a party of strangers. You don't want one guy to go rogue and start just trolling and then make everyone wanted. But if you're playing with friends, you can have like one guy go do something to make him wanted. Wanted status removes friendly fire protections for groups. So you just shoot your buddy after he does something rude. You take his bounty, you give it back to him if he needs it. The whole system is pointless. I don't know how they got through. No one tested that, or no one had that thought. Like, hey, if I'm going to play my buddy's going to do all the bad stuff. I'm going to shoot him, take his money, and then if he wants the money back, I can just literally just hand it right back to him when he respawns on me as part of his group. It is ridiculous. So it's this really peculiar system it's more sideshow than feature. I don't know why it's even included in this stage of the game. Honestly, it's very silly, which makes Fallout 76 stand at a weird place in between a cooperative game and an MMO. Yeah, I think the experience would have been superior if Bethesda committed just to one of those, either a more traditional narrative that you can experience cooperatively, or just this full-blown MMO with player hubs and raiding and proper PvP zones. Because as it is, players are primarily just ghosts that don't do much other than make spooky noises and move things when you're not looking. Unexpectedly for a Fallout title, the narrative hardly bears mentioning. There's one here, but the players only feel tangential to it. You're tasked with piecing together the events in history per notes and holotapes. Hundreds of notes and holotapes. And this is super obnoxious. If you're playing with a group, you can't really ask them to stop and wait while you read and listen to all these bits and clues around. So you are unlikely to do that when you're playing with a group. But then when you play alone, all of a sudden there are holes in the story and the world. And even when you are playing alone, it can be, you don't necessarily want to stop and read so much. The story quests themselves are linear, and it's really easy to feel disconnected because they are given by these robots Bethesda tried really hard to give some of these robots personality. There's not a lot of it. Even with these robots and the ones that are, it can be a little grating. And then, so you just have these quests that are given by robots, or you find a holotape of some dead person saying, "Oh, before I died, I was doing this. Finish it for me." So you just finish the task that somebody else has started. There's no impactful decision making. There's just you just go through it, and it doesn't feel. It's inconclusive. It doesn't feel conclusive at the end. It's just setting up for future content, which Bethesda has been their strategy. They've been, transparent with that strategy. They're going to support it, quote unquote, forever. But still, you go through the story, and there's not a satisfying conclusion. Okay, this thing is so buggy. This is just riddled with bugs. I hope the QA guys were paid well, because nobody listened to them. Some people have had really severe stability issues. I haven't had the worst of those, but that's fine. There have been lots of other issues. I'm not going to name them all because we'd be here for a while, but there's been animations not loading, quest items not working, quest targets not working, dialogue not loading, enemies clipping through walls and doors and floors and just all the time, perks not working, perks being having extra perks for no reason that then disappear, holotapes not working, players now they're players all the time invisible or nude and distorted in some weird way, which is honestly usually pretty funny at least. Loot on things I know should have loot just not loading. Sometimes severe stability issues when a nuke is dropped. Nukes are a late game mechanic. They force stronger enemies to spawn, but for there's more loot. There's end game loot, I should say, not more loot necessarily. But there's more end game loot there. But it just sometimes it's super laggy when that happens. Sometimes not. Who knows? Maybe maybe those a few special times. Really hard to tell with this game. Items disappearing from my inventory. Items disappearing on the ground after being dropped because the trading system is trash. So usually trading just involves dropping stuff on the ground and picking it up. But sometimes you drop it and the earth eats it, and that's infuriating. Enemies, I was shooting enemies with a minigun. They would rapidly regenerate health, or I would fire my Fat Man and explode immediately for no reason. I found a harpoon gun. It shoots harpoons. That's pretty cool. But the harpoons don't work if I'm shooting down, or up, or even if I am shooting straight across. Like sometimes they just don't work, and I don't understand it, so I can't use that gun anymore because it doesn't work. That's not the only gun that doesn't work. Some items are supposed to be junk and they're not junk. Some items are junk and they're not marked as junk. And then players will load before camp spawns. They get stuck in the camp, and then gunshots, instead of being gunshots, are punching sounds, which is also at least funny. AP not training correctly one way or another. Grenades unequipping themselves. Stimpaks not healing. Weapons pushing enemies through walls. There's a lot. There's just a lot. There's a lot. It's there's so many bugs, and some things could be bugs, but I don't know because the game's so opaque and unintuitive that sometimes that I don't know when things are working the way they are supposed to. Should I expect a laser sniper to not do damage at close range? That sounds like that could be by design, but I don't know if it is. Should I expect certain mods to like crush weapon durability at a crazy rate compared to other mods? I don't know. Could be intentional, could not. Sometimes disease timers refresh themselves to these crazy like multi-hour durations. Was that supposed to happen or not? I can't. I don't know. I don't know. If you can't Google it, you can't really tell because Fallout 76, despite having all these aspects, despite being a complex game, there's no reference. There's no way to tell you what should be happening, what should be going on. Your best bet are pro tips in between loading screens, which not good enough. Just not good enough. So, in conclusion, Fallout 76 is opaque, unintuitive, poorly constructed, often frustrating, and always buggy. It's an unrealized title released too early for proper quality control. But I love it. Despite all my criticism, I'm drawn back to Appalachia on a daily basis. There's so much to explore, so many ways to build a character, so many ways to define your character. I can't get enough of playing it. Every step is earned. The rewards are constant, perpetual. The world's diverse, and it's this refreshing atom punk that combines humor and tragedy. As a big thing I was worried about before was that sometimes Fallout doesn't get that tone right between humor and tragedy. So it's like Fallout 3 didn't quite do it well, New Vegas did it well, Fallout 4 messed it up again, and now this one I think so far it could lean a little more towards the humor, but there's been more humor than in the past, so I do really appreciate that. And whether I'm running around the countryside, listening to the Appalachian radio, or clearing dungeons with my friends, I'm experiencing the types of excitement and wonder that drew me even to a lifetime of gaming. It's a sense of joy I only get from a game once every few years, even if I do have to say that's completely broken like every hour. It is quite a conflict for me. So if you're a Fallout fan who doesn't mind gameplay that's a little more action RPG, because of course the in-depth character-driven narrative with impactful decisions is completely absent. This is really about upgrading your character and fighting and exploring. Then Fallout 76 I would recommend, especially if I like-minded friends to share with. Appalachia is too big and beautiful to ignore. It has a lot of the world of Fallout in there. There's just a lot of Fallout here to explore. And despite that recommendation and my personal enjoyment of the game, it is too hard for me to make a general recommendation. The technical failure plagues the Appalachian Waste even worse than the Scorch Plague. It's just everywhere. It just doesn't work. And even when the game does work as intended, it's a grind by design shoot and loot gameplay loop, which is not for everyone. Some people they don't like that. It's kind of like, some people don't like playing Diablo because you go to a place, slap a bunch of demons, they drop loot. Hopefully it's better than what you got, so you can do it some more. Sometimes the feeling is a lot like that, and that's not for everyone. So, but if that is for you, at least wait a few months to see if Bethesda has chipped away at the extensive list of issues, which sounds like they've learned they need to do that. That's a big problem. The game it doesn't work very well, and it's infuriating. Especially when I try to justify it, because I do enjoy playing it. So I have to try to I'm playing my friends, and then if they run out of patience, that can be very difficult for us to all continue having fun because something didn't work right, and that can be very frustrating. And then that makes it less fun to play with your group when your group is mad that the game is completely broken. And that's it. Fallout 76, available now, PC, PlayStation, Xbox. Not hard to find. Check it out if you're interested. I'll see you later. Thanks for watching.